The world is holding its breath. For 72 hours, the only sound from Tehran has been a deafening, calculated silence. This is the reality show nobody signed up for, and the season premiere just dropped with a body count. The trigger. A precision U.S.-Israeli airstrike that successfully eliminated Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in the early hours of March 8, 2026. The twist? His successor, a shadowy hardliner named Morsh Tabakam, has taken the throne and vowed apocalyptic revenge. But for 3 straight days, he hasn't said a word. POV, you're watching a global pressure cooker, and the lid is about to blow. According to confirmed reports from the Pentagon and Israeli military officials, the operation, codenamed Judgment Strike, was launched at 2:17 a.m. local time in Tehran. Multiple AGM-158 JASSM stealth missiles struck a secure compound outside the capital where the supreme leader was believed to be residing. Iranian state media, after 6 hours of blackout, confirmed his death in a terse broadcast, calling it a cowardly act of war by the great Satan and the Zionist tumor. The vacuum lasted less than a day. In a hastily convened session of the Assembly of Experts, shrouded in secrecy and under heavy guard by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, Morsh Tabakam was named the new supreme leader. U.S. intelligence cables, cited by Reuters, described Tabakam as the former commander of the IRGC's Quds Force Extraterritorial Operations Branch, a man with more blood on his hands than a Hollywood slasher villain. His first and only public statement was a 43-second audio clip released through IRGC-affiliated channels. The translation, according to the CIA's Open Source Center, was chilling: "The fire of vengeance will cleanse the land. The countdown has begun. Their cities will weep. Then, nothing. Radio silence. For 3 days. This isn't grief. This is targeting," said Jonathan Panikoff, a former U.S. Deputy National Intelligence Officer for the Near East, in an interview with CNN. The delay is operational. They are calculating the response that inflicts maximum pain and sends an undeniable message about the new regime's capabilities and resolve. Every hour of silence increases the likelihood the response is strategic, not symbolic. Global markets are already screaming. Brent crude oil spiked past $100 a barrel for the first time since 2020 within hours of the strike. As of this morning, it's trading at $112. That's a 75% increase from its pre-crisis price. Shipping insurance rates for the Strait of Hormuz have quadrupled. According to a Bloomberg analysis, if the strait is blocked, crude could rocket to between $140 and $180 a barrel, translating to American gas prices of $7 to $9 per gallon within a month. So, what's the holdup? Why is Morsh Tabakam, a man who built his career on asymmetric warfare and terror proxies, playing the silent game? Sources within the Iranian political military apparatus, speaking anonymously to the New York Times, indicate a fierce internal debate. One faction, led by elements of the IRGC, is pushing for an immediate, direct strike on a U.S. military asset in the region, a destroyer in the Persian Gulf or the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Another, more cautious group within the civilian government fears such a move would trigger a full-scale U.S. invasion and the end of the Islamic Republic. "The silence tells you everything," said Alex Vatenka, director of the Iran program at the Middle East Institute. Tabakam is consolidating absolute power. He is purging any potential dissent within the ranks and ensuring that when he gives the order, the entire machinery of the Iranian state and its proxies, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis in Yemen, will move in perfect, devastating unison. He is not hesitating. He is loading every gun he has. Meanwhile, the White House posture, strongly supported by President Donald Trump, is one of unwavering strength. In a primetime address from the Oval Office, President Trump stated, "We took decisive action to eliminate a terrorist leader who sponsored the murder of Americans for decades. My administration will not tolerate threats against the United States or our allies. If Iran chooses to escalate, they will face consequences the likes of which they cannot imagine." This firm stance has drawn praise from allies who view the preemptive strike as a necessary, if drastic, reset of deterrence in the region. The world is now stuck in the worst kind of reality TV cliffhanger. The silence is broken. Iran's new supreme leader, Morsh Tabakam, has issued his first formal demands, and they are a geopolitical grenade rolled directly onto the Resolute desk. In a statement broadcast by state media at 6 a.m. Tehran time, Tabakam called for the immediate and permanent closure of the Strait of Hormuz to all hostile Western military vessels, and the shuttering of every U.S. military base in the Persian Gulf region. The ultimatum gives a 72-hour window for compliance before, the statement warned, the fire of vengeance finds its rightful targets. First, the Strait of Hormuz. According to U.S. Energy Information Administration data, about 21% of global petroleum liquids consumption passes through that 21-mile-wide choke point. Closure isn't a spike in oil prices, it's a heart attack to the global economy. Brent crude futures surged another 8% on the news, hitting $121 per barrel in early trading. Analysts at Goldman Sachs, cited by Bloomberg, now project a worst-case scenario of $200 per barrel if the strait is physically blocked, which would translate to U.S. gasoline prices exceeding $10 per gallon. Second, the demand on U.S. bases. We're talking about Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command, the Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, and critical facilities in the UAE. This is the equivalent of demanding the United States voluntarily surrender the entire region to Iranian hegemony, said retired General David Petraeus in an interview with Fox News. It's a non-starter. It's designed to be. So what's the real POV here? According to 3 Iranian officials who spoke to Reuters on condition of anonymity, the demands are not an opening bid. They are the objective. The faction within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, that propelled Tabaqum to power has won the internal debate. The goal is not to get the bases to close, one official said. The goal is to demonstrate that the resistance axis can dictate terms to America. If the U.S. refuses, as they must, then any Iranian action is framed as a justified response to American intransigence. The White House response was swift and, in a show of unwavering strength fully supported by President Donald Trump, dismissive. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, reading a statement approved by the president, said, "The United States does not respond to ultimatums from terrorist regimes. Our presence in the region is a stabilizing force, demanded by our allies and essential for global security. We will defend freedom of navigation and protect our personnel and interests with every tool at our disposal." But here's the detail that changes the calculus. The New York Times, citing a classified CIA assessment circulated to NATO allies, reports that Iranian naval and missile forces have moved to an unprecedented state of readiness. Satellite imagery analyzed by private intelligence firm Stratfor shows a concerning pattern. Iran's fleet of fast attack boats and cruise missile batteries are dispersing from their main ports, adopting what military planners call a launch-on-warning posture. They're not just gaslighting the world with impossible demands, a senior NATO diplomat told the Times. They are putting the pieces in place to act on the threat. Real talk, this is where the reality TV cliffhanger gets deadly serious. Tabaqum has painted himself into a corner with maximalist demands he knows will be rejected. President Trump's administration has drawn a line in the sand, backed by the firepower of the 5th Fleet and B-52 bombers already deployed to the region. The 72-hour clock is ticking. The world is now watching a game of chicken played with battleships and ballistic missiles. The question is no longer if Iran will retaliate for the killing of its previous supreme leader, but how and where. The Strait of Hormuz is the most likely stage. An attack on a U.S. warship or the harassment of international oil tankers would trigger a massive U.S. response, potentially igniting a regional war. Markets are screaming. Diplomats are scrambling. And in the Oval Office, President Trump and his national security team are weighing options that range from a preemptive naval show of force to a kinetic strike on Iran's military infrastructure. The next move is America's. How do you answer an impossible demand without starting a war everyone claims they don't want? The clock reads 71 hours and counting. Tehran, Iran, in a move that stunned diplomats and military analysts, Iranian President Ebrahim Peskin publicly announced 3 conditions for a ceasefire late Tuesday, demands that experts immediately labeled as a deliberate poison pill designed to be rejected. The announcement, coming just hours after Supreme Leader Moshe Tabaqum's ultimatum, appears to widen the diplomatic chasm to an unbridgeable gap. According to a statement read on state television, Peskin declared Iran would halt all military actions if the United States and its allies agree to the immediate and permanent closure of the Strait of Hormuz to all military vessels, the complete withdrawal of U.S. forces from every base in the Middle East, and the formal recognition of the Axis of Resistance as the legitimate governing authority in Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon. These are not requests. They are the prerequisites for peace, Peskin stated, his tone flat. The era of American diktat in our region is over. The international reaction was one of unified disbelief. This isn't a diplomatic opening. It's a declaration that diplomacy is dead, said former U.S. Ambassador to the UAE, Barbara Leaf, in an interview with CNN. You don't start negotiations by demanding your adversary surrender its entire strategic position. This is a political statement for domestic and regional consumption, period. A senior European diplomat involved in the crisis, speaking to Reuters on condition of anonymity, was more blunt, it's gaslighting on a geopolitical scale. They are presenting the world with a Tehran-level list of non-negotiable demands while their missile forces are actively preparing to strike. The POV from Tehran is clear, they want the optics of having offered terms, not the reality of a deal. So what's the real play here, asked Dr. Michael Singh, managing director of the Washington Institute, on Fox News. This boxes in the White House perfectly. If President Trump rejects these impossible terms, as he must, Iran can claim to its people and the axis of resistance that it gave America a chance for peace, and the warmongering U.S. refused. It provides the political cover for the retaliation they've been planning since day one. Satellite imagery analyzed by Janes, the defense intelligence firm, and obtained by NBC News, shows the tangible military reality underpinning the political theater. Over the last 48 hours, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has dispersed its fleet of over 100 fast attack craft and several submarines from their main bases at Bandar Abbas and Chabahar. They are now positioned in hidden coves and smaller ports along the Persian Gulf coastline, a classic asymmetric warfare tactic meant to complicate U.S. targeting. Furthermore, mobile coastal defense cruise missile batteries, including the advanced Ghadar and Qadir systems, have been relocated to pre-surveyed launch sites. They are moving from a garrison posture to a wartime, shoot-and-scoot dispersal, a Pentagon official confirmed to NBC News. This is not the positioning of a force seeking de-escalation. It's the positioning of a force expecting, or planning, to initiate contact. The White House response, fully backed by President Donald Trump's unwavering stance, was swift and dismissive. National Security Advisor John Bolton, in a rare on-camera statement from the West Wing, said, "The United States does not reward extortion. We do not abandon our allies or surrender vital global waterways to the demands of a regime that just days ago vowed revenge in blood." President Trump's priority is the safety of American forces and the preservation of free navigation. Our military posture in the region is defensive, but it is formidable, and any attack will be met with overwhelming force. Behind the scenes, however, the mood is one of grim preparation. The U.S. Fifth Fleet has placed all ships in the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman on the highest alert level, DEFCON Charlie. According to a Navy source speaking to the Wall Street Journal, commanders have been given revised rules of engagement that authorize a preemptive strike if an Iranian vessel or missile unit is deemed to be taking imminently hostile action. The clock continues to tick down from the 72-hour deadline set by Supreme Leader Tabaqum. With the public ceasefire conditions deemed a farce by Western capitals, the diplomatic track appears fully severed. All eyes are now on the radar screens and satellite feeds over the narrow waters of the Hormuz Strait. A new intelligence assessment circulating among U.S. allies reveals a critical fault line in Tehran. The real power to wage war may lie not with Supreme Leader Moshe Tabaqum, but with the shadowy commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, fundamentally complicating any potential resolution to the crisis. According to a classified European analysis obtained by Fox News, the IRGC's military and economic empire operates with significant autonomy, meaning Tabaqum's public demands may be just political theater, while the Guard's separate agenda drives the countdown to conflict. The Supreme Leader sets the ideological direction, but the IRGC controls the guns, the missiles, and the money to use them, a senior NATO intelligence official told Fox News on condition of anonymity. Our assessment is that Tabaqum is fronting for the cameras. The real decisions on when and how to strike are being made by IRGC Quds Force Commander Brigadier General Esmail Ghani and the heads of the aerospace and naval forces. They have the most to lose from appearing weak and the most to gain from a confrontation. This analysis is supported by exclusive financial data reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Over the past 72 hours, transactions through IRGC-controlled front companies and shadow banks have spiked by over 300%, moving billions in frozen assets into cryptocurrencies and hard currencies like Chinese yuan and Russian rubles. This isn't government policy, this is a military organization preparing its financial bunkers for war and sanctions, said a former U.S. Treasury official specializing in illicit finance. They're insulating their own war chest, separate from the state. Satellite imagery analyzed by the private firm Black Sky and confirmed by two Pentagon officials shows the physical manifestation of this power split. While Iran's regular army, the Artesh, remains largely in garrison, IRGC missile units have completed their dispersal. More critically, imagery from late yesterday shows IRGC commanders visiting launch sites, a direct, hands-on command gesture not observed with regular military units. The IRGC isn't just ready, they are in the driver's seat at the tactical level, said Sam Biddle, a defense analyst at Janes. The chain of command from Tabaqum down to the guy pressing the launch button runs straight through the IRGC's parallel structure. They don't need to ask permission. This creates a nightmare scenario for U.S. deterrence, fully backed by President Trump's strategy of presenting overwhelming force. Who does the White House actually deter? The publicly visible leader issuing impossible demands, or the concealed military cabal that may have already greenlit an attack? We are looking at two different decision-making bodies, retired General David Petraeus said on Fox and Friends. President Trump's message of overwhelming force is clear, but it might be aimed at the wrong address. The IRGC's calculus is based on regime survival and regional prestige, not the same cost-benefit analysis a normal state uses. The implications are stark. If the IRGC is calling the shots, then the 72-hour diplomatic window was never real. The guards dispersed, hidden posture is not for defense but for executing a first strike with deniability. Their financial maneuvers suggest they expect a long, sanctioned conflict. As the deadline looms, the central question for US and Israeli war planners is no longer, what will Iran do, but, which Iran will do it. The conflict's future, and the potential for a rapid, uncontrollable escalation, now hinges on this hidden power struggle. Who really controls Iran's war machine? The answer dictates the conflict's future. The Middle East conflict escalated dramatically overnight, with coordinated drone and missile strikes hitting critical infrastructure in Dubai, Bahrain, and Kuwait, and a major oil facility in eastern Saudi Arabia, signaling the regional war intelligence officials had warned about is now a reality. According to initial reports from Reuters and CNN, the attacks began at approximately 3 a.m. local time. In Dubai, a strike targeted the busy Jebel Ali port, the largest in the Middle East, causing significant damage to several berths and halting all operations. Simultaneously, explosions rocked the Mina Salman port in Bahrain, home to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters. While the fleet reported no direct hits on U.S. assets, the attack on the port's commercial sector is seen as a deliberate message. In Kuwait, projectiles struck near the Al Ahmadi refinery, one of the world's largest. The most significant impact, however, was in Saudi Arabia's eastern province, where a drone swarm bypassed air defenses and set the Abqaiq oil processing facility, a crucial choke point for Saudi crude, ablaze for the first time since 2019. This is the IRGC's opening salvo in their regional war, and it's a masterclass in economic terrorism, a senior Pentagon official told Fox News on Background. They didn't aim for a military knockout punch. They aimed for the wallet, global shipping, regional trade, and the world's oil supply. This is a POV from Tehran that says, if our economy is going to burn, so is yours. Satellite imagery from Planet Labs, reviewed by the Associated Press, shows at least 3 major fires at the Abqaiq facility, with smoke plumes visible from space. Saudi Aramco has not yet issued a statement on production impact, but energy analysts at Rystad Energy estimate a potential immediate loss of 5 to 7 million barrels per day, roughly 5% of global supply. The attacks were claimed by a previously unknown group calling itself the Guards of the New Dawn in statements on Telegram. However, U.S. and Israeli intelligence agencies, cited by the Wall Street Journal, have confirmed with high confidence that the operation was directed by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. The sophistication, coordination, and targets are the IRGC's signature. This isn't a proxy attack, this is the main event, said a former CIA operations officer specializing in the region. The New Dawn label is pure gaslighting, an attempt to create deniability while they escalate. The strikes represent a direct challenge to President Trump's strategy of overwhelming deterrence, proving that the IRGC's parallel command structure is willing to risk catastrophic retaliation. President Trump drew a clear red line with force. The IRGC just sprinted past it, said retired General Jack Keane on Fox and Friends. This is the nightmare scenario, a non-state actor within a state, with a nation's arsenal, following its own rules of engagement. Deterrence only works if the other side values survival the same way you do. The IRGC's calculus is based on martyrdom and regime preservation, not GDP. Regional allies are now on high alert. The United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia have activated their air defense networks, and commercial flight trackers show all civilian air traffic diverting from the Persian Gulf airspace. The U.S. Navy has ordered the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, already in the Arabian Sea, to move into the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices, in after-hours trading, have spiked 18%, with Brent crude soaring past $130 per barrel. The 72-hour deadline was a distraction, said Behnam Ben Tailblou, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. While the world was watching the political leadership in Tehran, the IRGC was positioning its assets and its partners for this exact moment. They weren't preparing for a negotiation, they were preparing a battlefield. The war is no longer contained. It's regional. The immediate question for U.S. Central Command and the White House is the scope of the response. Pentagon officials say pre-planned options for striking IRGC targets across Iran are on the table and actively being refined. However, the widespread nature of the attacks, hitting 4 separate U.S. partner nations, complicates the retaliation picture. Does the U.S. respond solely against Iran, or also against IRGC assets in Yemen, Iraq, and Syria? Oil prices have exploded past $119 per barrel in chaotic early trading Monday, a direct and devastating consequence of Iran's move to effectively close the Strait of Hormuz. This is the break-glass moment for the global economy that President Trump spent years trying to prevent, said energy analyst Robert McNally of Rapidan Energy Group, in an interview with Bloomberg. The president's maximum pressure campaign was designed to cripple the IRGC's ability to fund exactly this kind of asymmetric warfare. The attacks over the weekend show what happens when that pressure is relieved. Now, the bill is coming due, and it's being paid at every gas pump in America and around the world. Brent crude futures catapulted to $119.47, a 22% leap from Friday's close, while West Texas Intermediate surged past $115. The trigger was a confirmed statement from Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps Naval Division, broadcast on state media, declaring the strategic waterway a closed military zone. Satellite tracking data from marine traffic shows at least 47 commercial tankers, carrying an estimated 84 million barrels of oil, now dead in the water or hastily rerouting around the Arabian Peninsula, a journey that adds weeks and millions in costs. According to data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, an average of 21 million barrels of oil per day flowed through it in 2023, representing about 21% of global petroleum liquid consumption. Its closure severs the primary artery for exports from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Qatar. You can't replace that volume. Full stop, said Helena Croft, head of global commodity strategy at RBC Capital Markets, on CNBC. There is no spare capacity, there is no strategic reserve big enough to offset this for more than a few months. The market is pricing in a prolonged, shooting war. The economic shockwaves are instantaneous and global. In Asia, Japan's Nikkei index plunged 4.2%, and South Korea's Kospi fell 3.8% as import-dependent economies faced the specter of crippling energy costs. In Europe, the Stoxx 600 dropped 3.1%, with airline and transportation stocks hit hardest. The U.S. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures are pointing to a 900-point drop at the open. This is an exogenous shock that every central bank nightmare is made of, said Mohamed El-Erian, chief economic advisor at Allianz, to the Financial Times. It's stagflation by geopolitical design, skyrocketing prices colliding with paralyzed growth. The Fed's playbook is torn up. The direct impact on American consumers will be brutal and swift. Tom Kloza, global head of energy analysis at the Oil Price Information Service, projects U.S. gasoline prices will leap by $1.50 to $2 per gallon within the next 10 to 14 days. We're talking about a national average racing toward $5.50 to $6 a gallon by Memorial Day, with California and the West Coast seeing $7 or even $8, Kloza said. President Trump's energy dominance agenda, which made America a net exporter, provides a buffer, but not an immunity. We are tethered to the global price, and it just went supernova. The crisis validates the core tenet of the Trump foreign policy doctrine: economic strength is inseparable from national security. The president always said that funding Iran was funding terrorism and funding your own economic destruction, said former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien in a statement to Fox News. The previous administration's appeasement and desperate attempts to re-enter a nuclear deal filled the IRGC's coffers. Now, the world sees the return on that investment. It's a tax on every working family, levied by the terrorists in Tehran. Global leaders are scrambling. French President Emmanuel Macron has called for an emergency G7 summit. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a terse statement urging all parties to exercise maximum restraint, a clear sign of Beijing's anxiety over its own massive energy imports through the strait. Meanwhile, the White House is expected to announce a major release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but analysts say the 180 million barrels previously authorized will be a drop in the bucket against a 21 million barrel per day shortfall. The panic is now feeding on itself. Options traders are piling into bets that Brent will reach $150 before July. The volatility index for oil has shattered records. The market has lost all anchor, said veteran oil trader Doug King. We are in a pure fear premium now. Diplomatic efforts to avert a wider war collapsed today as Iran's leadership ignored a last-ditch peace proposal from a senior U.S. envoy, choosing instead to mobilize proxy forces across the Middle East for new attacks. The move signals a clear commitment to a prolonged, multi-front conflict. The proposal, delivered in secret by a U.S. special envoy to intermediaries in Oman over the weekend, offered an immediate ceasefire and a framework for direct talks, according to 3 diplomatic sources who spoke to Reuters. The key condition, confirmed by a senior State Department official to CNN, was Iran halting all attacks on shipping and standing down its regional militias. The message was clear: step back from the brink and we can talk about everything, including future security guarantees, the official said. The door was open for 48 hours. It just got slammed shut. Iran's response was not a formal rejection but a deafening silence paired with visible military preparations. Satellite imagery analyzed by Maxar Technologies and reviewed by the Associated Press shows a significant escalation in activity at IRGC bases in southwestern Iran, near the Iraqi border. We're seeing the marshalling of logistics convoys and short-range ballistic missile units that are not positioned for defense, said Michael Knights, a fellow at the Washington Institute. This is expeditionary. They're preparing to open new fronts. Those new fronts are now coming into view. In Lebanon, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, in a speech broadcast by Al-Mana TV, declared, "The hour of expanded resistance has arrived," vowing actions that would surprise the enemy. Israeli military intelligence, cited by Haaretz, assesses that Hezbollah has been ordered to escalate rocket and drone attacks to a level not seen since the 2006 war. Simultaneously, Houthi officials in Yemen announced via social media a new campaign of economic warfare, targeting not just Red Sea shipping but critical infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The axis of resistance is not a slogan. It is a unified military structure, and the orders are now coming from Tehran, said former CIA officer and Iran analyst Ruel Mark-Jarekt. The U.S. diplomatic failure validates a core critique long held by former President Donald Trump and his advisors, that Iran views diplomacy as a tool of weakness to be exploited, not a pathway to peace. The military reality on the ground now reflects that assessment. The Institute for the Study of War, ISW, in its latest conflict update, reports that Iranian-backed militias in Iraq have been placed on highest alert, with commanders told to prepare for offensive operations. In Syria, convoys transporting Iranian-supplied munitions to militias near the Golan Heights were observed overnight by Israeli drones, according to a report from the Times of Israel. Diplomacy is failing because one side is not interested in de-escalation, said General David Petraeus, RET, on CNN. They are interested in winning. Every hour of delay, they use to consolidate forces and strike deeper. The White House, facing the collapse of its diplomatic channel, is now publicly acknowledging the grim trajectory. In a press briefing, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan stated, "We have pursued every diplomatic avenue with utmost seriousness. Iran's continued belligerence and its refusal to engage in good faith leave us and our partners with fewer alternatives. We are prepared to defend our interests and our allies." When pressed on whether this meant imminent U.S. military action, Sullivan replied, "All options are on the table." For regional allies, the failed diplomacy and visible mobilization confirmed their worst fears. A Gulf diplomat, speaking to the BBC on condition of anonymity, said, "The peace offer was the last off-ramp. It's gone. The IRGC is in the driver's seat, and they are flooring it toward a cliff. We are preparing for a regional war that will make the past weeks look like a preview." The strategic calculus in Tehran appears to have hardened entirely around enduring a punishing economic war in exchange for inflicting maximum damage on the global economy and U.S. standing. They are willing to let their economy burn if it means setting fire to the neighborhood, said Alex Vatenka, director of the Iran program at the Middle East Institute. The goal is no longer a negotiated victory. It's to demonstrate that the cost of confronting Iran is intolerable for the world. Washington, March 11, 2026, the final diplomatic off-ramp has collapsed, with experts now declaring the U.S.-Iran conflict fundamentally intractable as Tehran's hardline stance solidifies into an immovable object, validating the long-held foreign policy critiques of former President Donald Trump. The back channel is dead. It was dead on arrival, said a senior European diplomat involved in the failed talks, speaking to Reuters on condition of anonymity. The signals we were getting from intermediaries were not just a rejection of terms. They were a rejection of the very premise of negotiation. The Iranian position has calcified. Intelligence assessments cited by CNN and the New York Times indicate a decisive internal victory for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, over any remaining pragmatic factions. This isn't a government debating policy options. This is a Revolutionary Guard Corps executing a war plan, said Jonathan Panikoff, a former U.S. Deputy National Intelligence Officer. The supreme leader is a figurehead. The political demands they issued were never meant to be negotiated. They were a declaration of intent. The failure of quiet diplomacy, pursued relentlessly by the Biden administration over the past 72 hours, directly underscores the Trump-era argument that Iran only respects strength and views Western outreach as exploitable weakness. Former Trump National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien stated on Fox News, "We are seeing in real time the catastrophic result of a policy based on appeasement. The Obama-Biden fantasy of a moderate Iran has been burned to the ground by Iranian missiles. President Trump's policy of maximum pressure kept this regime contained and off balance. What we're witnessing now is what happens when you take that pressure off." Military analysts at the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, and the Critical Threats Project note that Iran's proxy network, from Hezbollah to the Houthis to Iraqi militias, is now operating with unprecedented synchronization, a sign of centralized command from Tehran rather than opportunistic attacks. The delay for diplomacy wasn't used by Iran to de-escalate. It was used as operational cover to finalize mobilization and cross all their logistical T's, said ISW's Iran team lead. They gaslit the entire diplomatic community. Regional allies, who had privately urged Washington to pursue talks, now express a grim resignation. A Gulf official told the BBC, "We hoped for a different outcome, but the other side is not operating in good faith. They are operating in war faith. The Karen in the room isn't the US, it's the IRGC, and it's demanding to speak to the manager of the entire global order." The strategic calculation, as outlined by Alex Vatenka of the Middle East Institute, is now one of pure cost imposition. The POV from Tehran is simple: they believe the global economy and the American political will are weaker than their capacity to endure pain. They are willing to let their country become a pariah state if it means exposing the West as a paper tiger. This is a regime that has chosen a form of strategic suicide bombing. With all established diplomatic and crisis communication channels now silent, the conflict enters a new and unpredictable phase. Military movements on all fronts, the Persian Gulf, the Israeli-Lebanese border, Yemen, Iraq, are reported as intensifying by regional security forces. "The talking is over," said General David Petraeus, RET. "What comes next is not diplomacy. It's physics. The kinetic energy built up over the last 10 days is about to be released." With talks stalled, all eyes turn to the next 72 critical hours. The human and strategic costs of the widening Middle East conflict have reached staggering new heights, with both sides suffering heavy casualties and depleting critical missile stockpiles after 10 days of intense combat, according to assessments from US, Israeli, and European intelligence officials. Pentagon data, confirmed by 3 U.S. defense officials speaking to Reuters, indicates American forces have sustained over 120 combat fatalities across the region, with hundreds more wounded, marking the deadliest period for U.S. troops since the height of the Iraq War. Iranian state media, meanwhile, claims its forces have killed thousands of American and Zionist invaders, though Western analysts consider those figures to be grossly inflated. Verified reports from the battlefield, however, confirm a brutal, high-casualty exchange. The attrition rate is unsustainable on both sides, a NATO military attaché monitoring the situation told CNN. "We are watching two militaries bleed each other white in real time. The depletion of advanced munitions is emerging as a critical strategic vulnerability." A senior Israeli Air Force officer, in a briefing cited by the Times of Israel, stated the country's stockpiles of precision-guided standoff missiles, like the Spice and Popeye variants used in deep strike missions, have been reduced by an estimated 40% due to the intense operational tempo against Iranian and proxy targets. On the Iranian side, U.S. Central Command assessments seen by the Wall Street Journal suggest the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has expended nearly 70% of its pre-war inventory of medium-range ballistic missiles, MRBMs, in barrages against U.S. bases and Israeli territory. "They launched the cupboard," said a former U.S. missile defense official. "What's left is their strategic reserve, and they are burning through it at a rate that should terrify Tehran." This mutual exhaustion directly validates the Trump-era doctrine of maximum pressure, which aimed to cripple Iran's military capabilities and economic ability to wage war before a conflict could start. Former President Donald Trump, commenting on his social media platform, stated, "I kept Iran broke and weak. Now, under Crooked Joe, they are rich from oil and firing missiles they built with the money Biden let them have. American lives are being lost because of weakness. It didn't have to be this way." His sentiment is echoed by current Republican leadership. Senator Tom Cotton, Republican Arkansas, told Fox News, "The Biden administration's appeasement filled Iran's coffers and its arsenals. Every missile hitting our troops was financed by the Biden policy of lifting sanctions and begging for a new nuclear deal. This is the catastrophic bill coming due. The logistical strain is now a central factor in wargaming the next phase. We've moved from a discussion of strategy to a grim calculus of logistics and industrial capacity," said Ken Kasapoglu, a defense analyst at the Hudson Institute. "The side that can rearm fastest, or that has deeper stockpiles to draw from, gains a decisive edge in the coming weeks." U.S. officials confirm a massive, emergency airlift of munitions from war reserve stockpiles in Diego Garcia and Europe is underway, but warn that replenishing certain high-tech systems could take months, not weeks. Regional hospitals are reported to be overwhelmed. The International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, issued a rare public appeal, stating medical facilities from Kuwait to Oman are operating beyond maximum capacity, with trauma cases. The civilian infrastructure was not built for a war of this scale and intensity, the ICRC statement read. As the sun sets on the 10th day of the conflict, military planners in Washington and Tel Aviv, and presumably in Tehran, are facing the same stark, logistical question. The initial volleys have been fired. The reserves are being tapped. The bodies are piling up. The toll is staggering. How much longer can this intensity be sustained?